So folks, I'm gonna get us started just with some housekeeping first and tell you some other things that are going on. Welcome, my name is Isaac Zablocki. I'm director of the Film Center at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. We are really excited to be premiering here today, Shamir, His Way, for Yom Ha'atzmaut, and I think this is a great time to really present this film. Chag Sameach to everyone. Hope you're all celebrating Israel's 73rd anniversary. And in many ways, this film, I think, tells the story of Israel in many senses. So we're excited about this panel. Before we get started, let me just share that coming up, starting April 29th, is our ReelAbilities Film Festival, New York Disability Film Festival. We are going to be presenting amazing films from April 29th till May 5th. Please spread the word and join us. And we're really excited about the lineup of the festival. We're going to have our first in-person events in over a year, but everything will be virtual as well, and mostly virtual. Opening night will be a drive-in in Queens. And we're going to have a comedy night on the rooftop of the JCC. For those of you who haven't visited us there in over a year. Thank you all so much for being a part. And of course, we're soon going to announce our May and June programs. A lot of exciting programs coming up this spring and summer. Now for today's screening, we're excited to have here a fantastic panel. First of all, I'll introduce the filmmakers, Erez Friedman. Erez, thank you for joining us.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. And Igal Lerner. Igal, you're here? There you are.
He's on mute.
Unmute yourself so we can hear you.
Good evening to everyone.
Noa, are you joining the conversation as well?
I am.
Noa Cacharel, would you introduce yourself? As far as I know, you're helping get the film out there. But,
I'm the international sales agent.
Wonderful. And you'll recognize him hopefully from the film, Yair Shamir. Yair, thank you so much for being here. Yair, of course, is Yitzhak Shamir, former Prime Minister's son.
That's true. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you all. Let me start with where this film came from as a film. Before we talk about Yitzhak Shamir himself, let's talk about the kind of the seeds of this film and what allowed it to all get started. Who's taking the responsibility here?
Igal.
Okay. Actually, it happens approximately, I think, 3 years ago. We, together with Erez, we try to understand, because, you know, in the last few years, especially in the last 2 years, many elections happened here. And we try to define what, to be a bit nostalgic about leadership in earlier era of time. And what happens here in the Likud party, especially, before Benjamin Netanyahu rise up. Then we remember Yitzhak Shamir, that after Netanyahu and Ben Gurion, our legendary prime minister, actually was in that job, especially for 7 years. And we decided to unsolve his mystery. Maybe it's the most secret and interesting and very envy for his privacy and unknown of his past. And therefore we decided to light his earlier years before he became prime minister, especially in the Lehi party and the Mossad, and to understand his mechanism in exactly 30 years ago. Maybe the most important in his last year as Prime Minister, 1991. And as you can see in the film, I hope you will like it.
Erez, did you want to add anything?
Yitzhak Shamir did a lot for Israel. 60 years of his life dedicated for the Jewish people and the Israel. He did it quietly, and he was forgotten in Israel. That's why we got to this project, to bring us back, the mind of the Israeli people.
You're both touching on a lot of the points that I wanted to explore a little bit in this conversation. And Yair and Noa, actually, would you both agree that he's somewhat of a forgotten character?
May I respond first? I mean, in my humble opinion, he is not forgotten at all. I remember Shamir growing up as a child, for example. I can still vividly remember the Gulf War, and I remember scars falling here in Israel. And I remember Shamir, and I specifically thought, at least, we have a leader. We have someone who can trust, who we can rely on, someone, who is in charge. And ever since then, Shamir had a warm place in my heart, and I believe also in the hearts of other Israelis. Like for us, he was and he will always be an icon. Personally, I don't think he was truly forgotten. Of course, there are other politicians like perhaps, Bibi, they are more, they chase after the spotlight. Shamir wasn't like that. Now, because he wasn't chasing the spotlight, no, I wouldn't say he was forgotten. It's like people still remember him. He's still a very profound icon, at least in my humble opinion.
Yair?
Yeah, it's, of course, for me, first of all, it's my father, but beside that, he was my best friend ever. And for me, it didn't bother me until people start to say to me, "Come on, what are you doing for the memorizing of your father? What are you doing this?" So I have a dilemma because he himself, he doesn't need it when he was alive and he was on the job, whatever job he had, and. She said, why we need it? Why this? No, forget about it. What's the big deal? But, and by the way, on his gravestone, we wrote one sentence from his autobiographic books, who says, and I'm quoting it, "And as for myself, I hope to be remembered as a man who loved the people of Israel and the land of Israel and stood by them all his life and in any way he had to offer for this support." So I'm trying, me and my sister, we are trying to do some actions and some operation in order to memorize his name, but in his spirit. So we are doing with no too many drums and trumpets. We are doing it simple things, telling the story, very humble and very low-key stuff. And this movie is part of it.
It's very, very just a great way to go about it, and it's a very impressive way, especially in this day and age, where if you're not, putting a big poster of yourself out there, then you're possibly not playing it the right way, especially in politics. Which really brings me to one of the things that I loved most about this film is seeing Shamir and hearing his stories, you see such a different period of politics in Israel. I'm not going to say that politics didn't exist. Politicians have to be politicians, and that's been a part of it. But really, I mean, this is such a, you see such a more innocent version of Israel. The politicians, I mean, we see we're all following, I mean, at least I am following closely, what the craziness that it goes on now in 4 elections in the last 2 years, and the inability to create any kind of government, the total fracturing of Israeli society into different groups. When you look at a movie about Yitzhak Shamir as prime minister, you see a completely different world. I remember I was looking for the opportunity to share the story where I ran into Yitzhak Shamir on the street in Jerusalem one day. When I was a kid, I was walking with my father, and suddenly you bump into the prime minister. He had one little guard behind him, walking far behind him. We shook his hand. He was completely open. It was a very different time. Today, with the celebrity culture in Israel, with the political culture in Israel, the corruption culture in Israel, there's politicians are all about being in front of the camera all the time. I'd love to hear from you kind of your reflection on exploring these 2 different worlds within the film, and how that comes to reality from your perspective.
You want me to start, or how do you want to do that?
Please, you start. Well, we'll switch off each time. Yair, you start this time. We'll work backwards.
Okay, so I also jumped for 2.5 years into the politics in Israel, from 2013 to 2015. I was the minister of course, I was the Knesset member, and I was the minister of agriculture. So I could measure from inside how it works. And I got, at the end of the story is that I admire my father 10 times more, because me as a minister, I couldn't move nothing because of bureaucracy, because of the Justice Department, or all the restriction is unbelievable. And in my father, you have a list of things that you want to achieve, and achieve them one by one. He didn't care what the newspaper said or written or this or that. His strength was the ideology. He doesn't care. He doesn't, not knock on his chest and say, I'm here, I am the only one, No, he said, I am here, a service for you guys. And I will serve you as long as you will elect me. The moment you will vote against me, I will take my stuff, I'll go home happy, and so on. And that's what they have done. Immediately after the election of 92, he just stepped down from the stage, and that's it. And and today, they will vote against you or not, you will stay there forever. You will fight again and again, change your philosophy, change your opinion. It's only me and nothing but me. And my father, the me was not important, totally not important, even in a very, I would say, exaggerating way. Because at the end of the day, you are also something here. You are not just another small screw in these big machines. But that's the way he worked. That's the way he saw himself. And I admire it. It's my role model.
That's really amazing. And if nothing else, this film should get out there. So it should be shown to Israeli politicians so they could learn how to be better serve the country. Noah, I'm working backwards. How about you as far as the reflection of the old politicians versus the new politicians?
Well, Shamir is exceptional. Like Yair said, he put the people first. He wasn't glued to his chair. You know, he came to serve and he had a mission. He had varied missions. He brought many immigrants from Russia, from Ethiopia. He improved even the economy, like he's done so many things. You know, he actually cared. What motivated him was not to be re-elected, but, you know, to actually provide real service and added value to the people of Israel. And he has amazing achievements and accomplishments. And it seems that nowadays people are more interested, or politicians are more interested in their own personal shares. So, you know, they only do things when it's close to election year, when they have to show something. But really, he sets very high standards. And I really hope that more people in Israel in general, and also politicians in particular, will follow his footsteps. Bezrat Hashem.
Erez?
I think the Shamir was represented the politics of a mission, not of not of public relations. He has a historic view of the Israel country and the Jewish nation. He told once to James Baker that it's in the film that he is the prime minister of the Jewish people. He has a historic view. He didn't see just himself, and he didn't see, you know, the just you know, the things that he didn't see just now, the present. He combined past, present, and future. He saw widely, and he was an idealist. All of these things are not, you know, these days we lack of those, all of those things in our politics. I think it's universally, but in Israel particularly.
Igal?
Yeah, it's me again. I write down few short points. It's important to mention for me. The first one is unity. You know, in these days we're talking about united the left and right wing, but he maybe was the first one that actually activate and did it. Whatever he didn't really necessary for it. So it's very important again, especially these days, and it's good to mention it. The second thing, speaking about unity, a lot of few participants in the movie was also from the left wing. For example, the ex-prime minister Ehud Barak, or Yaakov Peri, that was the head of the Shabak security service. And rather this, they have a good things to tell about this person, that choose his dream team that ran with him for many years, not because of their opinions, but because of their professionality. The second thing, as we spoke, you spoke about these days, you know, also in the States, you know, speaking about Trump or Obama or Biden, you know, all the communication and the press, he was very modest. Okay, he was low profile, and it's very admired thing, especially these days, was top secret. He didn't spoke about his past, especially in the early years. And the last thing, I think it's about leadership. You know, leadership is measured by taking not popular decisions. And if we spoke about 91, we started the movie in the Gulf War, as I told, as we mentioned before. Exactly, 91, exactly 30 years ago. For the first time, Israel was attacked by missiles and didn't answer at all. Okay, and a few months later, for the first time, the Madrid Committee, Peace Committee, with parties and countries that you know, didn't have any relationship with us before. And these two things was against his inner belief or instinct, because, you know, he was a militarist, considered militarist right wing. And rather this, he took decisions that was for, as he told, for greater good. Okay, not me and me and me, but the country before. And it's a very, very important thing, especially as we told these days.
Definitely admirable. And I think you mentioned two of the very interesting points in the film. It was amazingly built in the film, how, you know, Shamir was, you know, you build a character that is so much like, you know, never holding back to react when attacked. And then to have the Gulf War as such a test and, you know, showing another form of courage, it really, it's really a beautiful dramatic moment in many ways to see somebody who evolves that way and knows how to react that way and to do ultimately what I think was best. I'm going to ask two more questions, and then if anybody has, if there are questions from the audience, please put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to bring you online to ask these questions live. But one of them, we were talking earlier, and his name has come up. If we were having a drinking game, we'd probably be all drunk now. But Bibi Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, he followed up. He was the next, right? He was the next member of the Likud party to take the lead. He has basically led the Likud party mostly, off and on, except for Sharon since then. And in many ways, Shamir created Netanyahu. I remember it that way. I mentioned earlier, I remember that moment when Netanyahu stepped up to the press and kind of defended Israel and was put into the spotlight for the first time. Can we talk a little bit more about Shamir and Netanyahu's relationship and what Shamir would be thinking right now of Netanyahu's leadership? Yair, let's start with you.
Okay. I'm especially because the people are now very worried and from the consequences of the last 4 election, undecidable, and people stop me on the street because they recognize my face and my similarity in a way to my father, and ask him what he would have said if he would have come. So, in one of the TV shows, somebody said he would go back to his tomb and don't want to see that. I don't think so. He always looked at that in the perspective of his life, which is from Holocaust to where we are today. It's a miracle. It's unimaginable. Nobody could imagine that we will reach to this point. Okay, there are some difficulties, but the avenue that this state is going from democracy, from science, from education, the relationship between people. At the end of the day, whenever there is an emergency situation, this is the best place to be. And the Corona proved it. The Corona proved it. It's an amazing place. So we would love to see it. We would say, okay, there are problems, fix it. And if you don't know how to fix it, go. and that's his way. That was his way of life. He make decisions, solve the problem, and if there is something that I remember him since a kid, he said to me, "All speak less, do more. Don't bullshit us. You know how to solve it, solve it. You don't know, give it to someone else who can do that." So there are some things to be fixed, but overall, this is the best place to be. That's what he would have said, and I'm repeating it.
Igal, want to jump in next? I'm mixing it up.
Okay. I think that Shamir was kind of a lighthouse. Lighthouse, you know, it's not the prettiest building at the port, but the light and the direction are very focused. Meaning these days, you know, you as I spoke before about leadership, you know, you can tell something in June and do the opposite in September or after the elections. And he saw himself as a servant of a bigger idea, the legendary generation chain, you know. And therefore, as Yair told before, it took kind of not fear, but appreciate the mandate that the people voted for him. And, you know, he got it from Begin in the early 80s, and he cherished it. And at the moment that he understood the election he lost in 82, immediately after Madrid Committee, he took out and get out of the stage. And it's not obvious, again, especially these days, taking not popular, maybe in the as a self-example, hard decision as he took.
Erez.
Just one word about Netanyahu and Shamir. Shamir didn't vote Netanyahu. He didn't raise him to be the next leader of the Likud party and the next leader of Israel. He brought Netanyahu just to be the speaker during the Madrid conference. If Shamir, you know, is backing today, I think he was very proud of the Israel state, of the achievements of the country and the people. I think that he was very worried about the leadership and the politics. This is the gap.
Sure. Noah, anything to add?
Well, I completely agree with Yair. Of course, I mean, I've never met Shamir in person, but according to what I remember of him, is that he would always look at the positive side. So that he will always try to see, okay, see it, all the advancements, all the infrastructure, and we have created amazing things here in Israel. It's like we are celebrating 73 years. It's astounding. You know, it's like, just look at Tel Aviv or look around you, you know, we are building, we're growing, we're expanding. It's amazing. So I really think that Shamir would have loved that. Politics-wise, I'm not sure, because since he was such an honest person and he really stood for integrity and giving values, I'm not sure what he would think of current politicians. And I'm not mentioning names, because in a way it's like, you know, politicians in general, you know, they care more about their seat. hopefully one day I will be wrong, you know, when they will care more about us. Hopefully that day will come soon. And then, you know, and then we'll work together. And then, I mean, Israel will be in an even better place when this will happen.
So let me ask one more question before we take some questions from the audience. And again, folks, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we can call on you. But let me ask, what would you say is Shamir's proudest legacy? Throughout his, I guess there's a long history, there's the 7 years of prime ministership, but also just throughout his history, what moment is his proudest moment and his proudest legacy that he leaves behind? Yair, did you want to start? Sorry, Yair, you have to unmute.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I think that he was very, very, very extremely proud in the immigration from Russia and from Ethiopia. And basically 1.2 million Jews came from Russia to Israel. And this was a miracle. If the state of Israel is called today a startup nation, it couldn't be without this support of superb manpower, educated, culturalized, without him. And he saw it as his mission to bring maximum Jews into the state of Israel, into the land of Israel, basically. Regarding the Ethiopians, the decisions to bring the Ethiopian people, the Jewish Ethiopian community to Israel have been taken in previous governments. Nothing happened. And then suddenly there was an emergency situation in Ethiopia of turbulent times between regimes, rebels, blah, blah, blah. And then he organized airplanes from around the globe, from leasing airplanes and so on. And in 48 hours, they brought in to Israel about 16,000 people. So for him, this was somebody, the Kadosh Baruch Hu mission for him to execute. But above this, he fought for, if you have looked on who are his friends along his life, it was the fighters and the people who were ready to sacrifice their life in the Lehi, in the underground, prior to the founding of the state of Israel, and later on in the Mossad. And he didn't care about those rich people here and the celebrities and this. This was not his cup of tea, guys. Mm-hmm. And so for him, and he mentioned it in many separate events, that these guys who joined him and fought for the change of the status of the Jewish people, from depressed people that everybody can kill them and throw them and whatever, suddenly they have their own land and they have the capability to defend themselves, to prove themselves, and to live together. It's for him, this was the best of his life. So every time in every Independence Day, as we are today, and when you met him, he was so shining. No matter what was the economic situation, that he was full of joy and happiness on this. It's something bigger than him, this kind of joy. But he have done many other things that he was proud of. One of them is, if you will ask, who is the prime minister who bring to the Knesset and the two constitutional laws, the only two constitutional laws of the state of Israel? Nobody will tell you Shamir, but it is Shamir. The two liberal laws in Israel today, because he believed in Jewish state, but liberal and democratic. And where there are friction between this, we will solve it smartly, Jewish way. and you have done it.
Quite an example for others. Erez, let's go to you.
Of course, the Aliyah, as Yair said. The other thing, Shamir, on one side was the rightest, I think, he was the rightest Prime Minister of Israel, you know, the right, far right wing, but in the other hand, he renewed relations with more than 30 countries. In Africa, he renewed the relations with Russia. So he made a lot of progress about, you know, the relations of Israel with the world. And the third thing, Shamir kept the land of Israel under the sovereignty of the rule of the Jewish people, as he wrote in the end of his book. So these are the three things that he left for us.
Igal, were there others?
I can add one thing that maybe I've forgotten.
Yeah.
He was, as a foreign minister, he was the one who established the diplomatic and modern diplomatic relationship with China, with India, with Russia. Russia detached the relationship after the Yom Kippur War. He reestablished it. 30 states in Africa. But there was no communication about it. No, here, somebody have done 2 additional relationship with some islands in the Pacific Ocean. All the media was all over the place and so on.
Another drink. Yeah, I know. I think that this is part of the interesting part of Shamir's legacy, being so modest and so much about the mission that, you know, he just wanted to get things done. He didn't want to spend time taking credit. And other politicians know you just have to take credit for everything, and even if you didn't get anything done. Igal, you were gonna share? You're on mute still.
Yes. I think speaking about the immigration, until his period, until his time, the Russian immigrants considered refugees, meaning you can, there is I think immigrant station in Austria or in the Czech Republic. You can decide it left side to Israel, right side to the States, for example. And but he insists that they are not refugees; they have a country, the land of the Jewish, it's, the Israel, the Holy Land, and it's was a rapid accelerator for more than 1 million people come here in a very short period of time. I think until that time, been 5 million, something like this. Meaning 20%, more than 10%, you know, in 1 year, it's enormous. It's kind of miracle, you know, trying to think about this in numbers of the states. 30 million in 1 year. It's something and not very familiar. And therefore, I think it's also changed all the strategic move, you know, in this area, the whole geopolitical situation. Thanks for him.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changed all the demographics of Israel too. And one could argue, of course, that there might be political interest there too, once you're bringing in a certain demographic. Noah, his Shamir's legacy, one legacy, what would you say?
Making Israel stronger and more resilient. For example, one moment in the film that has personally touched me was the part when Shamir's father was quoted, and he was asked, "Are you afraid?" because it was during the Holocaust, and then he said, "No, I'm not afraid because my son is in Israel, and that he will avenge me. He will avenge the Jewish people." And I mean, I'm not about revenge, of course, but Shamir was all about keeping Israel strong and resilient. And I think as a legacy, it's so profound. You know, he protected many Jews, many Israelis. It was one of his main goals. And I think that for me, it's a very profound legacy because as I said, during the Gulf War, when there were missiles in Tel Aviv or elsewhere in Israel, you know, it's like you felt that you can trust someone. You know, it's like someone cares and that this is someone strong, that he knows what he's doing and he will defend you. Of course, it's only in Hashem's hand, but, you know, we are all his messengers. And Shamir was a rock. You know, Shamir in Hebrew is also a rock, so he was a solid rock. So being so solid, I mean, I think he also influenced Israel to be the same, and he gave us a lot of also security, which is, for me, it's a very profound legacy.
Thank you, Noa. I'm going to take some questions.
If I may add one point.
Yes, of course.
There was one issue that he said, and it is written in his book, in his, the only book that he wrote. He said that if there is something that concerns me for the future, for the present and for the future, is the unity of the people of Israel, or the Jewish people. This is so for me, I would say, if you compare it what happened today versus what happened before him and during his period of time, he established 3 governments with unity, and he didn't care less, and he gave Shimon Peres to be the first one in the rotation in this minute. Though he was an active prime minister, he said, okay, you will be the first, I will go down, because unity is, so he was looking for it. Don't think that there is a consensus, and put aside, don't think that there is no agreement, it will never happen. So, and today the other way around. Though there are more issues that there is a consensus about them, we are dealing only with those things that are outside of the consensus, which are not less important than the thing that we can handle. So for me, the unity and the capability to do what you believe in it, and what your mouth is sounding, that's what your action is active or activate.
Yeah. Unity is something that Israel is desperate for right now. I muted you, Yair, sorry, because there's noise in the background. I want to have a couple of minutes for some questions from the audience. Our first question is from Michael at Smon. Michael, you're on.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I very much enjoyed learning about Shamir's personal qualities and his successes, and some things that I hadn't been familiar with. The movie presents an admiring portrait, and it also comes across, of course, here in the discussion, but I didn't see much input from his critics, and so it makes it seem very one-sided. Was it a conscious decision to not give much emphasis to the substance of his policies, his insistence on keeping the occupied territories, his frosty relationship with George Bush? I mean, that was also an important part of his tenure. So I'm curious about the approach.
Sorry, I have to unmute you.
Yeah. So it's right what you said, but if you go deeper, you see that it's not exactly, because the movie is very balanced for those people that are interviewed. Basically, from politics and ideologic, they are on the other side, and they say good thing about him. It's Barak. It's all. It's so if you look at the movies or those people who were interviewed or talking about it, that's one thing. The other thing is that he basically, and another point, all the people surround him, he didn't care about what they vote and what are their ideas. If they are capable and they are ready to work with them, they are working. And it's Eliakim Rubinstein, later on he became the judge in the Supreme Court. He's not a Likud guy. I never asked him, but, or Avi Pazner, his speaker, and so on, and all the rest of, he chose a group, working with them, and everybody have a mission for what is the best thing for the state of Israel. You work with me about it, thank you. And he was totally open, by the way. Even in his discussions that I heard from people who were close to him, he was the first among equals. He was not at the end of the table, and he was the chief, and the elder said, yes, yes, yes. There was not a single yes man around him. So he was open to criticism. He was not afraid. And even when in his funeral, what Shimon Peres is, I would say, is opponent for many, many years, what he spoke about him from character point of view. He said, okay, we have a different opinion. He believed in what he believed, but we could do things together. When they took together the first unified government, the inflation in Israel was above 400% because they worked together in less than a year. It went out to reasonable, I think 5 or 6%. At that point of time, it was a miracle. But you can do that only if the two sides are working together. And he never get to the friction. He tried to avoid the friction. So everybody knows that he believed in the all Israel, this is our land, period. But again, on the other end, he was flexible on other things. So he kept his mind, he kept his ideology on the one end, on the other side, he was very practical and I would say gave chance to anything to work together with the other side. And there was a relationship with the establishment in Israel. I think the relationship between him and James Baker, as it's come up with his book, Baker Books, and also the stories that he told. I can share later on some stories about it. Or with with Schultz, it was not just one I would say senior officer in one country with the other. Nah. The two human beings sharing the same values, talking. They respect the other side opinion and behavior, but everything is fair on the table, no trick, no schmick, it's clean. And nobody can force him. Shamir was a strong character. If you try to force him in power, doesn't work. Try to persuade him, maybe, but not on ideological issues. I talk too much, I think.
No, it was amazing. Yes.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yair, if you can please just tell the audience a story with James Baker that he came to see your father. I think that is an interesting.
During the discussion about the peace process and Madrid and all the rest, there was a lot of tension between the two of them, but it was always respectful, always on the table, and then honest. Exactly. Each side know exactly what the other side believe and can do and cannot do. As years go by, and both of them were not in the office anymore, James Baker used to visit Israel from his own, business, but in every those visits, he visited my father in his office as a retired prime minister. In one of those visiting to Israel, he was on his way to meet Shamir, and in the car, he got a phone call that his mother, 91 years old, passed away. And she was a very religious Catholic Christian. I think it was Catholic, but I'm not sure. And he came to the office of my father, knocked on the door, get in and said, sorry, I just say hello. I just got the note that noticed that my mother passed away. I have to go fly back. Thank you very much. And then Baker is telling the story in his own words. One day, after 2 weeks or something like that, a big envelope came to his office. He opened it, and it was a huge poster stated that Shamir planted 91 trees on the mountain of Jerusalem. And Baker said that his tears suddenly were opened up and said, this is Shamir. He's an out cookie, but inside is a mensch. Is really mensch. And this is one story.
Does Igal or Erez, any other comments in this regard?
No, I think.
Okay. Igal, דבר, Igal.
No, actually, I want about the tough cookie. It was the issue. Both of them, Bush and Baker, considered him as a tough cookie. You know, he knew what he wanted, and they admired him by this character. And the first and the second thing, you know, we have 1 hour. It's, you can see one of the byproducts of this movie is a short. It's a three-part series in the History Channel that focus also on other things that we left on the editors on the editing room. But we have in this particular issue we have only 60 minutes, and therefore we decided to focus in 1 year, maybe the most dramatic, than the 91, and we have a hard decision. And but I think that the main two dramatic in this particular year, besides the immigration issue, was we call it between peace and war, meaning the Gulf War and the Peace Committee in Madrid. Now it's your turn, Erez.
Maybe another episode that I can. Maybe another episode that I can add, just as a pickle. It's when there was a discussion with Baker and Bush regarding the Madrid conference. My father put as a condition to start talking about it, that the Syrian will release the 1,500 Jews in Damascus. There was only, that's what remained there. And if Assad is no talking. So you can say it's a minor issue, and also the public was not aware of it. So what he will gain out of it? Guess what? Assad accepted. And the 1,500 Jews from Damascus arrived to Israel during the conference of Madrid. So those people know where to give up as well in this discussion, and it was firm on this demand. There was some other demand, I believe, that it was flexible, but something like that related to Jews, immigration, land of Israel, block.
Folks, we have a very short time, but let's try to take one more question. I think we can only get to Matthew. Matthew, let's grab a question from you.
Thanks. Can you hear me okay? So I happened to be living in Israel during his prime ministership in the late 80s, early 90s, was obviously very impressed with his toughness and how smart he was in maneuvering through everything he had to deal with. The one thing that surprised me about him that I'm curious to ask Yair's sort of take on is the interview that he gave shortly after his defeat in the 1992 election, where he sort of disclosed some things that I didn't expect him to disclose, that he was seeking to expand the settlements, to make a two-state solution impossible. Did you see that interview as a sign that he felt defeated, that he had lost, or was it more that he was maybe trying to inspire whoever came next in the leadership of Likud to continue in his path?
I don't know exactly because I don't remember this interview, but I would say the following thing. I think that to be accurate, I believe that he was asked about the settlements and the future of the settlements and about the solution of two states, and he said this, and he expressed his view, saying, I was 7 years prime minister. There is a fact. I didn't give 1 centimeter to the other side, and I'm expecting that no one else should do. Every leader on the future should do the same. And this is part of our country. This is our part of the land of Israel. And then we should do everything that we are doing in the Negev, in the Galil, or elsewhere, we should do also in Judea and Samaria. And by the way, until these days, all the buildings and the infrastructure that they are doing today are under the signature of Shamir. None of the prime minister after him have signed on those expansion plans, and not just expansion, also maintenance and so on. It's still his signature. It's unbelievable. So I don't think that he tried to influence somebody else, but he expressed his point of view, and this point of view didn't change for. This was part of him. He couldn't change it.
Folks, I'm afraid we're out of time. This has been fascinating. Thank you. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for sharing Shamir's story, because I think it's an important lesson to today's world as well, and especially to today's world. And there's a lot to learn from the kind of politician he was. Thank you all for being a part. Chag Sameach, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Stay well, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.